Imagine a world with no cold calling. A world where companies don't sell your data to other companies who want to pester you. At G4 Claims, we don't cold call and we don't buy a single lead from data companies. Oh, and if you're due any compensation from your car accident, you pay nothing to us at all. For full accident management support, including motor replacement, repairs and personal injury compensation claims, just search G4 Claims today. For help the way you want it.
Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the DW podcast. I am joined by Scottish writer Craig Robertson. Thanks very much for coming on, Craig.
Thanks for having me, Derek. Good to see you.
How are you getting on?
All good. Strange times, obviously, but all good right now.
We were talking just before we started recording there that this weekend would have been one of your festivals, flagship festivals in Stirling, but unfortunately it's all going online.
Yes, Bloody Scotland Festival would have been this weekend, and we're all a bit gutted that we can't actually meet and go to the pub together, which is the main thing. We're having the festival online. It's going to be great. It means we're going to be seen by more people. I think there's like 4,000 people signed up to watch on Saturday, but you miss that vibe of just being together in the same place. But we will make the best of it.
That's amazing, 4,000 people though. That's brilliant.
It's great. It means that people. We've got a lot of people watching from America that might not have got over before. We've had a lot of people that do come over, but not in those kind of numbers. So it opens up the world to us, really.
Of course. And was it an easy choice when you were thinking about destination Stirling? It's, I suppose, for tourists as well.
We've been in Stirling from year one. It was quite an easy choice, I think, in the end, because it's quite central. And if you go in Glasgow or Edinburgh, they already have book festivals, and you're up against more stuff.
Yeah.
So Stirling's worked out fine, and people, it's my hometown, so it works for me. I don't have to do any travelling, but people have enjoyed coming here, and it's good.
It's a great place as well, isn't it? And I suppose people are so used to going to Glasgow and Edinburgh, and they take for granted, I think, that Stirling's just up the road. It's what a fantastic place.
And even just in practical terms, hotels are cheaper, and for us, the rent places are cheaper than they would be in Glasgow or Edinburgh. So all these things come into it.
And for those that are watching or listening to this, Craig, that maybe don't know a bit about yourself, I don't know where they've been hiding for the past 30 years or so. But yeah, obviously you started your career in journalism, now a Scottish crime writer. Tell us a bit about the early days then. You grew up in Stirling. When did you realise that you had a passion for writing and journalism?
I think it all came in kind of relatively late. I've always enjoyed writing. It goes back to Mr. Oliphant's English class in third year when he told me that I was a natural at writing. And I know that my thought process at that point was, well, if I'm a natural at it, I won't have to try very hard. And so that was type of, right, I'll do that then. If it doesn't require much work, then I'm going to have a go at that. I've always enjoyed writing. I didn't get into journalism until I was 27.
Right, okay.
So I'd had a couple of years of being unemployed and just scrabbling around trying to get what I could and doing a bit of freelance writing. But I went to journalism at DC Thompson at 27 and did 21 years there.
That's phenomenal, eh?
Yeah, mostly at the Sunday Post. It was a long time, but looking back on it, I enjoyed almost all of it. Not so much the last few years. I'd kind of done my time and wanted out, but yeah, ended up doing a lot of stuff I just wouldn't have done in any other job.
What was your first steps into journalism? Because I know we'll surely go into it, but some of the things that you covered over the years, from the 9/11 terrorist attack, Dunblane, Madeleine McCann, etc. I believe you might have been one of the first to interview Susan Boyle as well.
I ended up just after Susan Boyle had started out, and got sent round to her house in Broxburn, and the front door was open, and there was sort of a TV crew had been in, and I just thought, well, there's nobody here. I'm not breaking into the woman's house. I'm just going to go and see if she's there. And she's in her kitchen making a cup of tea and got a wee bit of surprise. But the house was full of other people, I have to point out. And then we did an interview, so that was fun. She just thought I was another member of the TV crew, so it was okay. I started out in an internal training course in and DC Thomson, and it just kind of went from there. I don't suppose I thought it was going to lead to some of the things it did, but journalism gives you the chance to travel the world and do lots of odd things and go to strange places. And yeah, it was all fun, or most of it was fun.
Was it when you first go into journalism, do you find it's hard to, get your stories on the front page or get, the coverage that you want to get for your story? It's more, you go to DC Thomson and they'll say, this is what you're covering this week, rather than you saying, I think this is interesting, I'm going to...
It's a bit of both. You can come up with your own stuff. It's always the best way to do it. If you can find a story and convince them that they have no choice but to cover it. And obviously that's more difficult at the beginning because you need to build up contacts. But then they have to also learn to trust you to go and cover. If they've got a story that needs covered, you have to go and do it. I'd only been a journalist for, I think it was less than 3 years. And they sent me to do a one-to-one interview with John Major when he was Prime Minister, just like a month before the election. And I was thinking, why the fuck are you giving this to me? Surely there's everybody else on holiday. But, you grab it with both hands and you go and do it. And it's a bit nerve-wracking to begin with. But yeah, the bigger stories tend to come along a wee bit later. They need to trust that you can do stuff. If you're getting sent off to another country and the whole thing's on your shoulders, and they need to know you can...
Pressure's on.
Goods. Yeah.
What was it like interviewing John Major then so early in your career? Because I believe that you've interviewed 3 Prime Ministers in total since then, but that's the... I interviewed John Major, Gordon Brown, and Margaret Thatcher. Also was in the company of Tony Blair a couple of times, met him a few times, but not a full-on interview. Sure. John Major was interesting. He was actually a lot of fun to speak to. We sat down and it had been the Tory conference and he'd asked how I thought the speech went. And I said, well, the Tory members seemed to like it. I'd have been surprised if they had it. And he just laughed. He gave this huge laugh. And I was taping it. I just got a new tape recorder, digital recorder from my wife for my birthday. And this was the first time I'd used it. So I put it down. And also, like most men, I don't read instructions. I just sort of fiddle with it until it's going. So recorded the interview. And in that one, this is pre-devolution. I think it was 1992. And the big thing was that the Tories had won in Scotland 3 times in a row. And Scotland had voted Labour. So I'd said to him, if that same thing happens again, you get back into Downing Street, but Scotland voted Labour, would you consider devolution? And he said, give me a really careful answer about there's sometimes you might have to consider that route. And I thought, well, this is good, because he's not really gone that far before. Did the whole interview. I only had something like 7 minutes one-to-one to one, so you have to really cram things in. Went back to the office, turned on my new digital recorder, and there was nothing on it except him laughing at the beginning. It was the only thing that's on the recorder. Because what I had to check was it was volume activated. Right. So you set it and it'll only record things above a certain volume. So I've got him laughing and nothing else. And at that very minute, my editor phoned and said, how did the interview go? Oh, heart sank.
So I said, I just bluffed it. Now, if it had been a couple of years later even, I would have held my hands up and said, right, look, there's been a problem. But they'd entrusted me with this interview. So I said, oh no, it was great, it was really good. They said, all right, we'll put it on the front page then.
Oh no.
So I had to get this bit completely right about whether he'd committed himself to devolution or not. And I tried to phone, I knew the Tories had recorded it, so I tried to phone them, but they were in the air flying back to London, and by the time they landed, our first edition would have gone. So I remembered it as best I could. I can honestly say that only once in my career have I ever made up a quote, and it was from a Prime Minister. I still thought I'll get away with this, because it's only the Sunday Post, nobody will notice. The next day, on the front page of the Herald, was a headline saying Major hints of devolution, and in the middle of it is the quote that I largely made up in big bold letters. So that was a nervy week waiting to get called up on that. So I think I did my bit. I like to think I did my bit to bring devolution about.
And did anything come off the back of that? Did the Tories ever get in touch and say that's...
They didn't. No. They didn't. So either I got close enough, or there was no backlash against the quote, so it was okay. But every time the phone rang that week, I thought, but
Craig,
got away with it.
That probably speaks volumes about yourself, because some people would just crumble, wouldn't they? They wouldn't know what to write. They would.
Oh, I did crumble, absolutely, but I remembered most of it, and I hadn't really taken notes. But thankfully, I've got a decent memory, and that got me through it, I think. But I would not recommend that to anyone.
What a story, eh?
It could have been so much worse. But
how did Major compare to the likes of Thatcher? Because obviously up here in Scotland, there's many things that you could say about Margaret Thatcher over the years.
Yeah, he was quite approachable. He was quite approachable. She wasn't quite so approachable.
Yeah.
She wouldn't brook any kind of disagreement when she said. She would just like steamroller over you. And what you saw on TV from Thatcher was what you got in a press one-on-one as well. So, wouldn't say she was my favourite person.
Don't worry, I'm from Motherwell myself. You don't need to hold back in that front. But
no, I'm not. No, I mean, I wouldn't go. You remember that a lot of people played the Elvis Costello song of Tramp the Duck Down. Yeah. I played it once or twice. So.
It's interesting because obviously you see these clips of her previously on the television, and I've listened to her speeches previously, and she just seems like, as you says, what she says she gets, and I can't imagine that she'd be very approachable in an interview.
No, actually, there was a party line, it was her line, and that was it. And I mean, I didn't get lectured, but you've seen TV clips of her lecturing journalists about what they should be doing. What was it she said after Belgrano? It was like, rejoice. When they were complaining, you'll say, how do you feel about all these men drowning? Rejoice. So, yeah.
It's almost a different breed though from Thatcher and even Major, up until the likes today of Trump, and even closer to home Boris Johnson, isn't it? It seems like back then they were a bit more polished.
We're in a different world altogether. We're on the other side of the mirror, and the quicker we get back to some kind of normality in that front, the better. I don't know how long we're going to start with those two clowns for, but hopefully not too long.
What was is there any highlights, Craig, from your time at the Sunday Post? You were obviously there for over 20 years, and I've heard some great stories from one of your colleagues, Ewan, that says, you had some great times playing five-a-sides and down the pub, etc. But
it wasn't all playing five-a-side to be down the pub, but looking back, there seemed to be a lot of that. Saturday nights were great. So we would go, obviously, live on a Saturday night for a Sunday paper, and we would slog our guts out for a good few hours, right up to the wire all the time, to get the first edition out. We'd then have to make loads of changes, get the second edition out, with things changing around us, and then we'd try and get another. And that was, in many ways, the best out of the week. As many of us as we could manage, depending on circumstances, we'd get down the pub and take a breath. And, it was great. It was a really good bonding thing as well, because you'd all been just on the coalface and then just get away for a wee while. But highlights, I mean, I was lucky enough. I travelled a lot, went to the US quite a bit, across Europe and Ireland, went to India, which was an amazing thing. I went on a trip with the Rotary, who were at this campaign to inoculate people against polio in India. And I spent a week going around Delhi and up into the north, and we would give polio drops. I mean, I gave a polio drop to a 2-week-old baby in a back street of this dusty copper town, and it was an amazing feeling. People don't get to do that kind of thing very often, and you actually felt like we were doing some good. We were really doing something worthwhile. I mean, it would have been the same if I'd been there or not been there, but you feel like you're doing something worthwhile. We went to hospitals and saw the effects of polio, which certainly at that time was absolutely rife still, and some of the deformities caused by it were horrendous. But India was an astonishing place, and to go away from the tourist trails and see the real parts of India were a real eye-opener. So that would certainly count as a highlight.
I think that's something that people don't take into consideration. If people from Scotland are going to India, it's to do the touristy things, isn't it? It's to very much stay in the major cities. And as you're making.
We took a trip. My photographer Ritchie and we went up to Agra to Taj Mahal, and I hated it. I absolutely hated the Taj Mahal. Just partly the opulence of it, but just the sheer touristiness. I was not impressed by it. Also, the worst toilets ever encountered by man. So yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. India I loved, but not the Tuesday bits.
When also you mentioned travelling there, would I be right in saying that you spent some time on death row in America? Not
Yeah.
not personally. You didn't do
Not
anything.
personally. No, there's been plenty of people who thought I maybe should have done, but no, it was back. It was way back then. It was 2004.
Sure.
It was one of these things. It was a week that kind of summed up being the Sunday Post, because less than a week earlier, I'd been in Aberdeen doing a story on a training shoe called an MBT, which there were these really heavy sole things. And the idea was they made you fitter because it was tougher to walk in them, and they made you walk more upright. So it was a stupid story where they wouldn't sell you them off the rack. You had to be taught how to walk in them. And so I went up to Aberdeen to do this really dumb feature. And less than a week later, I was on death row in Ohio, interviewing Kenny Richy, who the Scot who spent 20 years in death row. And yeah, that was something of an eye-opener, to say the least. So you go through 2 different sets of security to get in for the main prison and then to death row. And it is a bit like the Silence of the Lambs, walking past, cells that people are in for 23 hours a day. And when they took us in, it was myself, the deputy governor, an armed guard, standing there holding a rifle, and a photographer that I tagged locally. And they bring Kenny Richy in, hands manacled, legs chained together, orange jumpsuit with a blue stripe down the side, and the blue stripe means he's going to be executed. And that's the real stops you in the tracks going, okay, this has been sort of fun so far, but it was it wasn't an easy interview, to say the least. He wasn't in a very good mood, and if I'd been locked up 23 hours a day for 20 years, I probably wouldn't have been in a very good mood either. And he didn't really want to talk, but I think in total I was given an hour to do it, and that was the maximum. After I'd gotten talking, he started giving me some stuff, and I'd asked him what he wanted to happen next, and he says, I want him to kill me. I want him to kill me or set me free. And I thought, okay, that's a good line. I'm solid with that. And we chatted a bit more, but we'd been no more than 20 minutes into the interview, and he starts talking about his dental treatment. Because he'd had work done that he wasn't happy with, and he wanted him to redo. And the deputy governor says to me, turn off your tape recorder, which thankfully worked this time.
You checked before you started.
I made sure this time it was going to work. And he said to Ken Richy, you've been told you're not allowed to talk about dental treatment. If you keep talking about it, the interview's finished. So I'm like, shut up. Puts the tape back on. He starts going on about the dental stuff. The deputy governor says, that's it. Interview finished. And they literally dragged him, kicking and screaming out of the cell. 2 guards dragged him out. And I'm like, fuck. I've just travelled 5,000 miles. So I'd said to him, look, can you get him back in? I've come a long way. I can't go home with only 15 minutes worth of interview. So he said, look, we'll send us a guard along. If he's calmed down, you can come back. And the guard comes back and goes, no way. He's off in one. So that was that. 15 minutes or 20 minutes ago. But I got enough that the head in Kill Me or Set Me Free gave me a front page lead.
Yeah.
BBC in London used it in the Monday morning. So
amazing.
I got enough, but yeah, that's kind of the way it is sometimes. Why do I say
How did that come about, Craig? How do you set something like that up? Is it
2 months? Friend of mine and of viewings, Adam, he dealt with Kenny over a number of years and done, I think, email interviews, and there was my mind's gone blank. There was a woman actually in Lancashire who corresponded with Kenny, was running the campaign. Karen Torley, thank goodness I remembered. So she helped as well, and Adam didn't want to go and do this, but I was up for it, and I contacted the governor and had to go through loads of hoops, sign all sorts of forms, and promise to do this and not do that. And it took, I think, maybe 4 months, maybe 5, and then it ended up lasting for 15 minutes. So, but it was enough. And
you got what you needed, yeah, ultimately.
Got what I needed. And it was an experience, yeah, to say the least.
What was it like going through there when you, as you said, these people are locked up 23 hours a day? Is it terrifying?
it's not terrifying because you know they're behind bars, but you're aware of it. And to say that I was very much aware that I would not want to be in here on my own. I've watched too many movies. But it's adrenaline rushing as well, that's all happening at the same time. And it's part of the reason I think a lot of us go into journalism is to do that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it's a challenge. And there's a nervousness about it not working, you're not getting the story, but that's all part of what keeps it interesting.
What was your thoughts behind leaving the paper then? Was it more your writing had taken over?
It was quite easy. It was quite easy in the end. I said I was there for 21 years. About 5 years before I left, I realised it was time to get out. I'd done most of the things I wanted to do. Plus, the writing was on the wall. Unfortunately, by the time I did leave, there was lots of redundancies, not just in the Sunday Post, but across the board.
Yeah.
Jobs were getting cut left, right, and centre. I could see it coming. And I figured my best chance of getting out was to write a book. I had no idea if I was actually able to do that, but I was going to give it a go. So I started about 5 years before the book came out. And I gave up on it a bunch of times. At least 3 times I gave up completely, just settled for it being a pile of shite and it would never get anywhere. I eventually managed to finish it. And so maybe this would be 2009. I got an agent. Within a few weeks, I had a few publishers want to buy it and bidding against each other. The book came out in April the 1st, April Fool's Day 2010, and I left in October 2010. Right. So by that point, I finished my second book by that point and had a deal to write another 2 books. So if I was ever going to take the chance, it had to be then. So it was time, and there was more redundancies coming. I grabbed one of those and said, right, I'm off to write books.
That's fantastic.
I've never regretted it, I have to say. It was the right thing to do. It was taking a bit of a gamble, but not too much of one.
Craig, do you feel that your background helped you, get an agent? I previously had Graham Armstrong, who's a young Scottish writer, on the podcast, and he says that I think he sent his book out to about 249 people before he actually got a yes. Do you think your background helped you get an in almost?
I think so. I suspect agents are maybe more likely to pick something up. I think they know if they get something from a journalist, it's probably going to be well enough written. It's probably everything's going to then turn up on time because we're used to working with deadlines. Yeah. And they know that publishers can sell it a wee bit on authenticity. Although, my first book was about a serial killer and I had no first-hand experience of that. But I think it definitely helps get a wee bit higher up the pile and get it read a bit quicker.
Your first book was obviously random, and it was fantastic. It's probably one of your most successful to date, if not the most successful. And do you think that your journalistic background allowed you to write that? It's a crime novel based in Glasgow. Did you ever touch on any of the stories that you'd seen in person or reported on that?
No, I tried to keep that out. There's always things that you gain experience as you go along in any kind of lifestyle and any kind of job. So with journalism, probably more of that. I think maybe the things that I brought into it more were how people react to being in the middle of crimes and really serious situations. In my later years in the Post, I sort of became the go-to person if something terrible happened. So they sent me to New York. I went to New York after 9/11, went to Omagh after the bombing, things like that. And you end up inevitably speaking to families who've lost loved ones in a really high-profile way. So I became friends with a family in North Carolina whose son was on the first jet that went into the Twin Towers. And I went over and spent time in their house and interviewed them. And a lot of that kind of thing fed into it. And also a father who lost his son in the Omagh bombing. And a father whose daughter died in Dunblane. And some of their experiences were similar in that these were not to them high-profile killings or events, and they weren't public ones. They were very personal ones. So he lost his daughter, they lost their son, and they didn't really want to share that with anyone else. And so that kind of reaction feeds into the books and like the way victims' families react to things. That kind of thing you pick up on. Yeah. I didn't do too much of real life crimes and situations, though I've done wee bits more since. Some people find their way into books in small ways, but I don't always admit to who they are. So.
It's interesting that you touched on the Dunblane and 9/11, because you must see that these things firsthand, and does it ever affect you personally, or can you remove yourself from that as a journalist or a writer?
It's a bit of both. The trick is to remove yourself from it and try and compartmentalise it to get yourself through it. Dunblane was one of the hardest ones for sure, because I'm from Stirling. It's only 5 miles away.
Yeah.
That week was that. So that week, our number 2 in the office had left about 3 weeks before it. So I got promoted to number 2 in the office, and the boss was off that week. Yeah. And it was the first week I'd ever been in charge, and that happened. And I went out to Dunblane along with a bunch of others, and the days in one sense were kind of easy, right? And I very much that's in inverted commas, because you're doing your job and you get on with it and you speak to people. But getting home, your legs just go away from under you, and you think, what have I been through? And also, at that point, my mother was a teacher with a primary 1 class, which is the class at Hamilton at Kill, and her school was about 400 yards from Hamilton's house. So I had all that kind of what might have happened
running through your head,
put on my head as well. So I think to do that kind of thing properly, it's a fine line. You have to emotionally connect with the job and with the people you're talking to, but not so much that it stops you doing your job. So it's a fine line, but the bottom line of that is always it's much harder for the people involved than it is for you. Yeah. They've lost loved ones. We're just having a tough week.
Yeah, I think it's to hear that these people opened the door to you and welcomed you as well. Certainly the family from North Carolina after 9/11, it probably speaks about yourself. That you're a very likable person and an honest and trustworthy person. But I think there must be times where journalists, the families are just thinking, I want you as far away as possible. So
I think with the 9/11 one, I went around the houses a bit to try. So this family, part of their story was their son Carlton. His wife had told him the day before 9/11 that she was expecting their second child. He told them one day, and the next day he died in that flight. So because of that, all the media in America wanted to talk to them. Oprah Winfrey had tried to get them on the show, and they refused. Thankfully, I didn't know that, or I might not have tried. I kind of tracked them down by going to the local area, and I found the church that they went to, and I went to the pastor of the church and said to him, I'd like to speak to them. If you think they would not have anything to do with it, or I shouldn't speak to them, I'll leave it at that. But if you think that maybe they'd want to talk, and I'll let them see everything I'm going to write, I'm not going to put anything in they don't want. And he went to them, they agreed on that basis to speak to me. I flew over, and the idea, I flew most of the day, and I got to their place way out in the country about maybe 10 at night. And the idea is I was going to stay in their place and we'd talk in the morning. Well, we sat down and just got talking over their kitchen table, I think till about 2 a.m, and it all just came flooding out. And it's a bit of a privilege, really, to be in somebody's life and them opening up like that to you, because it came obvious really quickly that not only had they not told the press some of this stuff, they hadn't told it to each other. They were saying things like, well, I didn't know you did that day. I didn't know that's how you reacted. So you're very much a position of privilege, and you can't abuse that. If you abuse that, nobody talks to you again. Yeah. So you really have to do it right. But on the other side of that, I was in Omagh. So the bombing happened on a Saturday, and the following Saturday, I'd been there for a couple of days, but I was in the hotel in Omagh High Street, right next to where the bombing took place. I was sitting with 3 or it might have been 4 local women who went to that hotel every Saturday night as a group, except one of them was missing because she died the week before. She died in the bombing. And a few journalists from other places joined us, particularly a guy from, I'm not sure I ever knew his name. If I did, I wouldn't say it, but he was from the Daily Mail. And he'd had a couple of drinks with no excuse. He said to me, leaning over the table kind of loudly, I don't understand why they're all so upset. I was at Dunblane and it was much worse than this.
So insensitive, isn't it?
I probably should have punched them in the face there and then, but I was so shocked that.
And this is in front of the families, Craig. That's in front of the.
Yes, this is in front of people who've just lost one of their best friends. So if you take that kind of view to your work, I don't think you should be doing it. But each to their own.
It's I'll not hark back in too many old podcasts, but I done an interview previously with Amanda Knox. And I remember watching the documentary beforehand on Netflix about Amanda's story, and there was a Daily Mail journalist there as well, and he came across terrible in it. And I don't know if that's a recurring theme with the Daily Mail. Or if
it might be, but I know lots of Daily Mail journalists who are perfectly good people and great journalists, so it's not all of them. Yeah. But, yeah.
It is interesting how people can be so insensitive, and I wonder if it's because they've been to so many of these, traumatizing events and, really prominent events in history that it just becomes a bit normalized to them.
There is that. There is a case that you get desensitized to it. There's also a case that you don't, but you pretend you do, and you're kind of whistling through the graveyard. There's always loads of black humour in journalism, in the same ways there is in the emergency services. Cops and ambulance drivers are the same. And it's a defence mechanism to get you through it. You're pretending you think this is all right, I'm having a laugh. Inside you're thinking, this is horrendous. You have to find a way of dealing with it. And there's also a bit of machismo going on that's not needed but happens.
Do you ever keep in touch with the people that you spoke to afterwards? For example, the family over in America who opened up over the table?
Yeah, they, I think maybe about a year after that, they came over and stayed at my house. They came over to visit Scotland. They spent the first week in and around Stirling, and they stayed in our house. I've been back over since, maybe 3 years ago now. Stayed back in the same place in the woods in North Carolina. And we kept in touch over the years. And initially, we kept in touch because we knew there would be other stories, because 9/11 was a very much an ongoing thing for a long time. But also, you just develop close bonds. If you get that close emotionally with somebody when you open up, then you tend to stick, and so that's happened. Yeah, we've quite a few families.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because at first they must be quite wary of you, and it's great to see that you've still got that relationship there, and you are a human being. You're not there just to take advantage of a story, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I think I wouldn't want to do that anyway. I genuinely wouldn't. But also, you want to cut your nose off to spite your face because nobody talks to you again. I remember we did a series. I think it must have lasted 3 years, maybe even 5, raising money to build new children's hospice. So I did tons of interviews at Robin House with families whose children were not going to grow up into adults, and they were always obviously incredibly difficult. But you would be very sensitive about them, and you had to be. And I remember going to see a family in Glasgow whose wee boy was, I think he was about 7. And he went to special school, but he obviously was not going to have any kind of value of life, really. But the whole time I was there, he was laughing and giggling nonstop. And that's the way I wrote it. And I wrote it, you went in the house and he's laughing. And I thought, his mum wanted to see it before it went in, because she didn't want me to write it and she wouldn't like. And that was fair enough. And I'd left a copy of it downstairs at the front desk of the office, and she came in to see it, and I got a call saying, Mrs. wants to speak to you. Shit.
Oh, no, what's going on?
What have I done? And I come down and she's in tears. Christ. And she rushes over and hugs me. She says, thank you for doing it that way. Because that is the way it is in our house. We're not all misery all the time. He laughs and he enjoys himself. I wouldn't want to get it wrong. And, so I think to do the right thing pays off more often than not.
Have you ever had the opposite, Craig? Has there ever been any really negative experiences where you've felt terrible afterwards, or you've?
Yeah, the worst one, or certainly the first one that comes to mind. I wrote a story about cot death. There was some possible breakthrough. I think it was a team in Edinburgh University, might have been a possible breakthrough. Turned out not to be on cot death. And they'd said, and so immediately you're in dodgy ground. Yeah. But they said that, and in the meantime, until this works, it was some changed to the mattress, if I remember rightly. You should follow the guidelines, which is to make sure the baby lies on its back and not on its stomach, and blah blah blah.
Sure.
And I knew that. I knew that was the guidelines. So I wrote the story, and for whatever reason, I got it the wrong way around. And I wrote baby should be placed on its front and not on its back.
Yeah.
And nobody noticed, and I never noticed. And it ran that way. And all hell broke loose. Maybe before your time, good morning, breakfast TV presenter Anne Diamond. She was like the queen of daytime TV.
Right.
Had a good show at 10 in the morning on BBC One, but she'd lost 2 children herself through cot death.
Oh dear.
And my advice was completely wrong. By Monday morning, the phone was ringing off the hook of people, women in tears and thinking they'd done it wrong or furious that I'd got the advice wrong. And Monday's our day off, and I got phoned to be told this, and I said, right, I'll come in and answer the phones because you shouldn't have to do this. And they were like, no, you cannot answer the phones. They'll rip me to shreds.
Spread rag to a builder.
Oh, and then on the Tuesday morning, Anne Diamond held up the paper, demanded that I be sacked and that the paper be. It wasn't a good time. My paper's editor at the time went and called on lots of favours from every newspaper across the country to give us a free advert saying this is what it should be, regardless of what we said. It's this. We're sorry. I'm an idiot. And Diamond then came back on I think maybe the Thursday, thanked us for doing all the changes. But yeah, I genuinely lived in fear for a long time that some kid would die and it would be my fault. That's how bad that was.
That's
and it was horrible. But that's the risks of getting something read by a million people. And also just potential for fucking up is always there.
Not to make excuses as well, but it is such a simple mistake to make. What's such a important thing, it's
transpose 2 words. And now what's happened since is the advice has actually turned round, and now some people are suggesting maybe you should sleep the other way.
You were a pioneer, Craig. You were a pioneer.
What about to do with it? But yeah, that was a rough week.
Yeah. Did you ever think about throwing the towel in at that point, or did you?
Yeah, I thought they might not give me any choice. They might just take the towel and hit me over the head with a struggling with it. But you've just got to get on with it. If you make huge mistakes in other jobs, chances are nobody notices. But if you do it in a newspaper, it's so many people see it. But also you can't take it back. You can't pretend you didn't do it. It's there in black and white. Another time I messed up, which didn't have such potential dire consequences. I'd been at football match on a Wednesday night with my brother and my mate down at Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock played Dundee United, and it was one of those wet Wednesday nights in Kilmarnock. And at half time, I went and got a pie. As you know, the Kelly pies, the be all and end all. And at that point, it came in a wee cardboard sleeve, and it said on it, "Best Scotch beef from Wales." And I thought, what? That's ridiculous. So, and also, I thought, right, I'm going to get a line out of this for the paper. And they had a column, still do, called As We See It column. And it's just little nuggets, 2 or 3 bars. So I wrote this mock indignation, "Best Scotch beef from Wales, that's ridiculous. Ayrshire full of cattle, Wiley, blah, blah, blah." So by 1 o'clock on Sunday, they'd had something like 150, 200 phone calls, lately pointing out that it's Best Scotch beef from Wales because Mr. Wales was a local butcher.
Oh, you're joking.
I'm not joking. A guy called Jimmy Wales was the butcher, and he, at that point, made the Kelly pie.
That's brilliant.
And so I was never allowed to look that one down. I had to do an interview with Jimmy Wales later in the week. He said, all these people coming in the shop going, "You see what these idiots in the Sunday Post have said."
But listen, I mean, for people outside the Ayrshire or Kilmarnock, that's understandable.
Yeah, but it was a lesson, always check, regardless how small the story is. Always check it. I came into work and there was some 4 mince pies left on my desk.
While you're on the subject of food, I was going to bring it up, Craig, but you're a black pudding connoisseur, I believe.
I am a black pudding connoisseur. It came about kind of strangely. I mean, obviously, I love black pudding. That was the start of it. just love it. And I then sort of took to going a wee bit further afield to eat black pudding elsewhere, because we tend to think of it as a Scottish thing, and it just isn't.
Right.
And so I've been to Clonakilty in Ireland, which is their main place for black pudding. I've been to Vienna. I've got a guy who's since become a friend, Franz Dormeyer, who makes, the last count, 60 odd different kinds of black pudding. So when he had shop, and we made black pudding at 5 o'clock in the morning. He makes black pudding in a stainless steel bath. It goes in, arms up to the air in blood. And it was good fun. And I've been a judge at the World Black Pudding Championships in Normandy.
Normandy?
It's a wee town called Mortagne-au-Perche in Normandy. And they have the World Black Pudding Championships every March. And I'd been once, and my friend Franz and the guy also, a French judge that I know, organised it. So I think in the end, 4 of us went over. I went over with 3 mates, and we got it's quite a big company house next to nothing. Went in, and we all got to be judges. But it was great fun. It's not something you do every day.
Do you know what?
I was sick of black pudding by the end of it.
I think I'm naive. You know what? I actually thought it was a Scottish thing as well. I'd imagine there's a lot of people out there like that.
It's completely different, but we all tend to think, Stornoway black pudding's the best in the world, but it really isn't. I mean, it's great, but it's my feeling that it's always, the story where John Lennon's asked if, because Paul McCartney used to play the drums as well, and Lennon was asked, is Ringo Starr the best drummer in the world? And he said he isn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. So I feel that way with Stornoway black pudding. It's not the best in the world. It's not even the best in Scotland. But if anybody from Stornoway's listening, it's wonderful, and please send me some.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Craig. Where is the best in the world, or the best that you've tried?
I love Spanish morcilla.
Sure.
It's fantastic. There's everybody knows Café Andalus in Glasgow. There's 2 of them. They do a fantastic morcilla with chutney. So go in there. I'm not getting paid for this. Go in there. It's fantastic. And the French do one. It's really simple as well. So love that.
I find that fascinating. I'm going to have to swat up my black pudding.
Everybody needs a hobby.
We touched on it, Craig. And then we went back onto your journalistic career.
Yes.
Obviously, Random was the first book, and it came out in 2010.
2010, yes.
5 years almost in the making, but it was a New York Times bestseller, shortlisted for crime.
Oh, I wish. No, it was a Sunday Times bestseller.
Sunday Times, right, okay.
Which was still way ahead of what I expected. So that was great, and these things all came in a bit of a rush. Yeah, it was shortlisted for the John Creasy, which is the debut book of the year, and it was longlisted for crime novel of the year. Didn't win it, but it was great, and it just took me to a completely new life, and it was a great thing, and it all kind of took me a bit by surprise. But yeah, it's been great.
What's the nerves like before your first book gets published? You've obviously read it a million times by then, over and over with a tooth comb, I suppose.
Yeah, it's different now. There's still a nervousness. There's still a nervousness now. So I'm now 9 books published, but certainly that first one, I think basically I just didn't want anybody to read it. I wanted people to buy it. So that I generally would encourage people, buy it, don't read it.
Buy it and put it in the cover then.
Because it's like the tree falling in the forest with nobody hearing it, and that's fine. So until it came out, maybe 3 or 4 people had read it, or certainly that I knew, and then you're there to be judged by everybody, and it's definitely scary, and that's still there to different extents. You're always really keen to hear that first review on it, hear what people say, and you're told to not read reviews, but I don't know an author that doesn't read reviews.
Yeah.
You want to know what people think. And thankfully, by and large, it's been good.
Did you worry at first? Like you're obviously putting yourself in the shoes of a serial killer. Do you think, oh my God, people might judge me here?
Oh yeah, I got lots of that. I got lots of people judging me as being, that I certainly have the potential to be a serial killer. But I like to think we all have the potential to do something. Maybe not quite that bad, but Yeah, there was a lot of use of imagination. You know, you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone, and could I do this? How would I do it? And yeah, there's a bit of leap of faith there to try and get that right. But you know, that goes with anybody who writes most books. The bog standard advice of write about what you know doesn't really stand up, I don't think. Write about what you're interested in, write about what you think people are going to enjoy reading. And what you don't know, learn about. You know, Google the hell out of it.
Do you, like, obviously, I think, was it 90% of your books or so are based in Glasgow, but do you
Yeah.
pick Glasgow because you're familiar with it, or obviously you're from Stirling originally, but you've spent many years in Glasgow? It's
Yeah, I worked in Glasgow for 19 years, maybe 20 years, and I stayed there for part of that. I decided against Stirling. I just thought it was too small, especially if I'm going to have a serial killer book. Doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't happen in Stirling.
No, it doesn't really happen in Glasgow that much either, thankfully. But it's unrealistic if I'm going to have a continuing series for me in Stirling. So I want to use Glasgow. It's also just a great place to write crime novels.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many things about the city just really works for it. All those stuff that are kind of cliche, you know, the black humour and the kindness and the aggression, all that stuff are cliche, but it's also true. You know, and they just fit really well. And Glasgow as a city just works. So, yeah, I think of the 9 books, 8 are set in Glasgow.
I'm sure that, you know, it's every country in the world has, you know, fantastic crime writers, but Scotland's blessed with them, you know, from Val McDermott, Ian Rankin, yourself, you know, there's loads for such a small country, and I wonder if there's something in the people of Scotland that just allows us to write about that type of topic, or I don't know what it is. What would you put it down?
I think there is. I think we punch way above our weight, and there's so many Scottish crime writers and doing it really well. But yeah, I think we have a sort of natural storytelling background. But a lot of things that fit into crime novels, you know, that dark sense of humour, a bit of a morbid sense of reality. Lots of those things fit into crime novels, and we use them well. Scotland's a good setting for it, but also with people like Val and Ian going before us, it opens up the doors and it gives people confidence to think, well, yeah, I don't have to set a book in Los Angeles or New York. You know, I can set it here and write about what I know and write about the people I know about. So, and if you can, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah. I read the review a while back now, Craig, but it was saying, you know, you've done for Glasgow what Ian done for Edinburgh. And I just thought, it's spot on, isn't it? It's really accurate.
Well, I'm very flattered by that review. No, I certainly haven't done for Glasgow nobody's going to do what Ian did for Edinburgh. If you've been to something like the Oxford Bar where Rebus drinks, he's done a lot for trade in there. For me, it's the Station Bar, which was our local at the paper. That was the one we go to on the Saturday night. So that's the pub I use more than anything in my books. But it's not in the tourist trail in the same way. I know people have gone after reading books, but not quite as busy as the Oxford Bar. I've got a bit to catch up in Ian yet.
I'm not putting any words in your mouth there. I'm not saying it's going to happen soon. It's funny. Is there a competitive edge to it, or are you all very supportive of each other? We spoke earlier about, you know, the book festival that was meant to be happening this weekend in Stirling, and it seems from the outside looking in that Scottish authors are very supportive of each other. But
we are. They really are. So my latest book came out in June, and on what happened in publication day there is what regular happens. So other authors will retweet it, put it out again on Facebook, get private messages of good luck and all the rest of it. And we are there. And we obviously not in the last few months because of lockdown, but we spend a lot of time in each other's company, either at book events, one-off book events, or at festivals. A bunch of the guys are in a band together, fun-loving crime writers.
Really? I never knew that.
They're great. I think half of them are Scottish. So it's Val McDermott, Chris Brookmeyer, Doug Johnson, Luca Vesti, Stuart Neville, and Mark Billingham.
Brilliant.
They played all over the place. They played Glastonbury last year.
You're joking.
No, and it was amazing. They're doing an event with them on Friday night. I'm going to interview the 6 of them, and it'll be some footage from Glastonbury. So it's great. So there's a lot of, we spend a lot of late nights together, standing at bars, occasionally talking about books, but certainly having a few beers, putting the world to rights. And I've been various book festivals in the US with, and there's lots of Scots there as well. So we all got on very well and support each other. I'm not saying there's no backstabbing, but there's very, very little of it.
I'm speaking to Chris in a few weeks, actually, so I need to bring that up to him. I was mainly going to talk about writing, but I suppose we need to see what Glasgow...
Oh, no, definitely talking about this, because he's a big music fan, huge music fan. But he joined the band as a vocalist and then learned to play guitar. Which is not the way it normally happens.
No.
So he's now played guitar on stage at Glastonbury, having joined the band as a vocalist. So
that's unbelievable.
It's wild. But they're all getting this, apart from Luca, who's only, I think, 36, they're all enjoying this wonderful midlife crisis of going playing gigs, and they're absolutely loving it.
You know, thinking about bringing out a tambourine or maracas and getting involved, Craig?
I would love to. I have no musical talent whatsoever, but they do let me buy them drinks and carry the drinks on the stage for them. I've done backing vocals a couple of times on Sympathy for the Devil.
Right.
I've done some moves on stage, I think maybe 3 times, which is terrifying for me.
I mean, I've spoken to quite a lot of bands on the podcast as well, and I suppose something that they always say is, you know, you've brought out that first album and then you're bringing out the second album and it's a bit of a challenge. Is that similar for writers? You know, when you were bringing out Snapshot, which I believe is your second book,
Yeah, Snapshot was number 2. Yeah, there's undoubtedly that same fear, because you know you've been lucky enough to do it once and you're going to get away with it twice.
Yeah.
And also there's a thing, certainly for me, I'm speaking to others, it's the same, that when you write your first book, you don't actually expect it to be published. You don't really expect anybody to be reading it. But for number 2, I've got a deal for number 2, and it's definitely coming out. Whatever I write, unless it's really terrible, it's going to get published. So there's a different pressure there, because you're writing and knowing people are going to read it.
Yeah.
And you know, random was a hit, so you need a follow-up, and the pressure's on to do that. So, but pressure's a good thing. It concentrates the mind, but every author's got a bit of that going on.
Yeah. What I find amazing though as well is you know, it seems like since your first one, you've brought a novel out nearly every single year. It must be non-stop. When do you breathe?
Not too often. Between that and Bloody Scotland, and I run a book festival in Butte as well, Butte Noir. So there's it takes up a lot of time. Actually, my most recent one, Watch Him Die, came out in June, and that was 2.5 years since the one before, and that's easily the longest gap. So that was a while. I started on another book and gave up on it after about 30,000 words, and then came into this one, and there was delays. So that was a long gap. I don't want to go that long again. It's that long till I get paid again as well. So as much as anything else, I need to keep them coming out. But luckily, there's no shortage. The ideas are still there. I've still got books lined up waiting to be written.
Brilliant.
I finished writing a book 2 nights ago, Sunday night, and as soon as the festival at the weekend's over, I think I'll be getting into another one.
Brilliant. Do you have favourites, or is it like your children? You shouldn't really pick.
Yeah, it really is like that. Although it pushed, most people do like some of their children over others. So it's always the first one. It's always random, and what I'm writing next. It's the first one and the next one, because I've probably already forgotten the book 2 books ago, because my head's full of the one I've just written and the one I'm about to write. I can't keep too much in my head at one time. So if I end up doing interviews for, say, a book that came out 3 years ago, chances are the person's read it more recently than I have, and I can't remember too much of the details. Still, I can't remember names except my main characters. But there's books that I've done. I liked Murderabilia. Involved a ton of research that I really enjoyed. So it's about, Murderabilia is a real thing. It's about people who collect items connected to murderers, usually serial killers. Yeah. And it's a thriving market of stuff you can buy. And I spent months researching this stuff, and it was fascinating. I probably ended up knowing more about it than was good for me. And I ended up buying some stuff as well. And it's
Really? Aye. What did you buy?
I bought. Let me remember. I bought a handwritten letter by Ian Brady, the Moors murderer.
Right. Okay.
I bought. There's a lot of stuff in the book about the Sharon Tate murders by the Manson family. And she lived at a house in Cielo Drive in LA, which eventually got bulldozed.
Yep.
And I've got a piece of the fireplace in front of which she was murdered. And I've got a lock of Charles Manson's hair.
Where do you purchase this stuff? What is?
There are specialist sites, and this is part of the doing it. So I had to learn about these sites and how you got into them. But I also wanted to know the process of buying them. And a wee bit going back to my journalism days, I wanted to know what it felt like for these things to come through the door and hold them. You know, what's it going to feel like to hold a letter that was written by Brady?
Yeah.
And it's not like holding a letter written by anybody else. There is something undoubtedly different about it. For one thing, his handwriting is incredibly neat. It's all absolutely on the line and neat and just. And I'm sure there are lots of people with neat handwriting who are not psychotics, but sure as hell looked like it in his case. And yeah, there is a feeling of he touched this, I'm holding this.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's not too keen on having them in the house, so she may have chucked them out when I wasn't looking. But
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can imagine that there must be this almost ghostly feeling around it.
There is. I did an event in California, in Berkeley, which is just over the bay from San Francisco. And I was talking to people there about Murderabilia. And I brought a rock out and said, I have this rock from the fireplace in Cielo Drive. Do you want to touch it? And the whole front row leaned back, but no way. There's no way I'm touching that. And then I explained to them that it wasn't that actual rock from the fireplace that's in my house. I picked this one up in somebody's garden on the way to the event. I said, now do you want to touch it? And we're all like, well, yeah. Right. So I said, what's the difference? You know, they're both just a piece of rock, and now you're okay with it. So I want you to look at that thing. Why? What's the psychology of this being imbued with, for want of a better word, the evil that it came from?
Yeah.
And they were okay touching just a piece of stone, but not the real thing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's brilliant.
Yeah.
What an intriguing story. You mentioned, your wife there, Craig. What is it about writers that seem to be attracted to other writers?
Well, I think we met at a crime writing festival in Colorado Springs. So there was opportunity, I guess, was what that came from. But also writing's, it's not like any other kind of job. And I think another writer understands that. So that there might be hours you don't want to speak to anybody. You just want to get your face into the laptop and write. There's times where all you want to do is think. You need a lot of thinking time, and you get that. It also helps that certainly pre-COVID, we would go to book festivals together, all over the world, and that was great. So we could travel together. We've done tons of that. And we were in a cruise in the Caribbean in November because Alex was doing a working gig on a cruise ship that took us to Bermuda and Puerto Rico. So there are wee advantages from both of us doing this.
That's the rock and
roll. Just being able to help each other out. Having a sounding board, for ideas and things is great. And somebody else who knows how to kill people keeps you on your toes as well.
You're sweating, constantly sweating.
Oh yeah, I'll sleep with one eye open.
Would you ever write together?
No, I think that would be recipe for divorce. I couldn't do it. I think Alex probably could, but not with me. I know how I want something to be, and I'm not much one for compromising on it. So she was a script writer before in Hollywood, so we'd work as part of a team. So she could do it, but I would just get a pain in the arse. And anybody who knows me knows that that's true.
I suppose a lot of it as well is very personal, isn't it? You're putting your own words in there. Yeah.
It is. I think we could construct a story together, but when it came to actually putting the words down, I would want to do it, and I wouldn't really want to mess with. And not that Alex is at least as good writer as me, if not better. And so it's not that. It's just it's my way of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can certainly knock the structure of the story together. But after that, I think you have to do it yourself. But that being said, Chris Brookmeyer and his wife Marissa, they write together as Ambrose Parry. Yeah. They do it, and they do not fall out, which is great. Nikki French is a husband and wife team. There's a few, but it's not for me. No.
Yeah.
No, it'd be a disaster. I mean, because we live together and work together 24 hours a day, and particularly at the moment when we don't really go out, to then work together on the same piece as well, that's a risk not worth taking, I think.
No. You care about the relationship too much, though.
I care about the relationship much more than my writing, so yeah,
Totally.
that's one that's got to be kept.
Are you still back and forward to America, Craig? Are you settled in Scotland?
Well, no, we were back. We'd normally be over there 3-4 times a year. I think in total, normally I'd be over in California for about 3 months a year, which is great. But we haven't been since March. We literally had to rearrange flights and get out of America in March. We'd just been to Venice 2 weeks before that when the coronavirus broke there. And we'd gone to California partly to see Alice's mum, and then they started cancelling flights. And it's like, right, we need to get out of here.
Get home, yeah.
And we haven't been able to go back since. So looking forward to getting back. But, looking forward to the world being safe. Yeah. So that has to happen first, I think.
And I hope.
We spent a lot of time over there. And my last book was part set. So it's half set in Glasgow and half set in LA, which I don't think I could have done a few years ago. But having spent a lot of time there and with Alice's help, to tell me when it was going wrong, I felt I could do it this time. So I think it worked. And lots of people from LA have read it and haven't pointed out things I've got wrong. So hopefully that worked.
Is that something you'd continue to do going forward? You're away from Glasgow now. It's not just.
I think so. I think I'll probably do both. The book that I've just finished is back in Glasgow, so it's completely set there. Well, I've got one coming up that I might write set completely in LA, but that's the next move. I haven't quite decided yet.
Brilliant. Where can people pick up your books if they've not done so already?
Hopefully they can pick them up in Waterstones. There's been loads of problems. Well, no, like everything else over lockdown. If this is still in September when the podcast comes out, it's on Watch 'Em Die's on sale for the whole month of September at the price of 99 pence, which is.
What's that actually? Is that a digital version?
Yeah, so it'll be on Kindle for 99p, which obviously is quite cheap. It doesn't always make me happy, but if more people read it because of that, then it's all good. But failing that, Waterstones will have all of them, or support your local independent bookshop if you can.
Yeah,
always do that.
It's funny that you mentioned Kindle there because I just can't do it. I'm a bit old school for that. I like a physical book, but
I'm the same. The only difference would be if I'm traveling and you can't, you don't want to cram a bunch of books in your face, and Kindle's great for that.
Right.
But I do prefer a physical book. But Kindle's got so many more people reading than wouldn't before, and that's a good thing. I don't care how people read them as long as they read.
Have you done any audiobooks? Have you done them as audiobooks? Or? Right.
I haven't done them in the sense of me narrating them, but I think 6 of the 9 are out. Yeah. I've had 3 different narrators, and it's really odd to hear them. Perhaps because I hear them with my voice in my head. So it's the audibles are there. I find it difficult listening, but more and more people are doing audiobooks all the time. So it's fun, and getting a different narrator is always a wee bit nerve-wracking as well. Because I don't or haven't had a say in them. So it's at one point, probably shouldn't say this, but never mind. My first 2 that were in audio, it was an Irish actor who was doing the narration, and he did them in a Scottish accent.
Is it poor?
And or to be more accurate, bless him, he did them a whole bunch of Scottish accents, sometimes on the one page. He would go from the Highlands to Glasgow to Brigadoon within a few paragraphs. And I couldn't listen to it. I think my publishers are in London, so they were going, what's the problem? It all sounds the same. I'm like, no, it really isn't all the same. His accent's all over the place. Mm-hmm. But he read it well, just in a whole different bunch of funny voices.
That's a Scottish thing. We'll pick that up, but I'm sure if people are listening in California, or as you said, London, it might not be.
Yeah, it goes straight over their heads. They think we all have one accent, and it's just not true.
Brilliant. Now, Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks very much for your time, especially, just now when we're stuck at home. I'm sure you've got lots of writing to do, but really appreciate you taking the time to talk.
That was fun, Derek. Thank you for having me on.
Nice one. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the DW podcast. If you've not done so, please like and subscribe, and go and check out Craig Robertson's books. Thanks.